Today I'm joined with a very exciting person. I've got Nick Loosley, a social entrepreneur whose projects span restaurants, food rescue and conservation. He's best known as the founder of Everybody Eats, which has turned surplus food into more than 300,000 shared meals. He's also behind WithWild, an innovative venture rethinking conservation through food. Nick's journey is all about reimagining the role food plays in connecting us, nourishing communities, and shaping a more sustainable future. You must listen to this podcast if you have recognised that you need to make some changes, particularly around the way that you work, letting go, staying healthy, and creating efficiency. Thanks for joining me, Nick.
Nice to be here.
Great. I know that you're the founder of Everybody Eats, and I remember the first time that I saw you speak, and you were very involved in the restaurant and with the day-to-day. It sounds like you've moved a bit further back, you're sitting on the board, and you have all of these other projects going on as well. So do you want to tell me a little bit about what you've got going on outside of family and what projects you're focused on at the moment?
Sure. Yeah, so as you said, I was running Everybody Eats from a sort of general manager perspective for the first 5 or 6 years, and then I stepped back and I'm now the chair of the board. I've always been on the board, but yeah, my role with Everybody Eats is sort of governance now, so I support the team. Still really involved, but yeah, not in the sort of details of the day-to-day stuff. So I also own 2 restaurants in the Bay of Islands, in Russell. So the Gables, which is now a sort of pretty approachable Italian restaurant where we make fresh pasta and really champion Northland and Italian wine. And then I have Horne's Garden, which is a wood-fired pizza craft beer garden, very, very popular, especially in summer. So I sort of own them and manage them remotely. I live in Auckland, so I don't spend a huge amount of time up there, but I have some really, really great business partners that sort of do the hands-on stuff there. During COVID, I set up a project with 4 other guys called WithWild. So we recover wapiti or elk out of Fiordland, and we sell that into various different restaurants and outlets. And just to add another project to my life, I've jumped back into the world of wine. So I'm doing what's called the WSET Diploma in Wine, which is sort of the level below Master of Wine. So yeah, spinning a few plates, but there's other stuff as well that I'm sort of working on that's not really live yet, but it might be at some stage. So yeah, I like to keep busy with lots of different things.
Yeah, I love that. And I kind of feel like people or other people might say that you should be focused on one thing and get really good at that before branching out and focusing on so many other things. Like, what would you say to someone that is really interested in juggling quite a few different projects at the same time? Like, what would your advice be?
Well, it suits me, right? So I'm someone that gets bored quite easily. So I need a lot of different things going on and not to have too much routine. So I think if you've identified that that's successful and good for your personality type, then once you've made that decision, I think it's really important to be someone who's quite realistic with your time. So, you know, there are obviously people that are eternally optimistic and eventually end up being late for everything because they think they can squeeze too much into one day. I think we spoke about that on the way here, actually. And then there are people like me who are so realistic that it could be considered by some people like that to almost be pessimistic. Yeah. So I think if you've got that type of personality, you're well organised, then this type of structure in your life or sort of lack of structure can be really good. But I know other people that spin a lot of plates that have a much more optimistic view on their ability to get things done and their ability to be places, and it's very chaotic. But everyone's different, you know, so it works for me. But I think you've got to be quite intentional to get it right.
Yeah, I mean, we did speak about this on the way, and my optimism around the amount of time that I have in a day. It's always wrong. I'm always telling lies. So do you feel stressed juggling a lot of things, or is it really exciting for you and works quite well?
Do I feel stressed? Sometimes I do. The thing is, when you've got, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different things on the go, projects, they can all be really busy or really quiet at different times, and sometimes you have no control over that. So if you're sort of the owner or you're the manager or sort of the buck stops with you, and you're business owners will understand this. Like you don't have a choice. You have to do it. You don't clock in and clock out at 9 and 5 o'clock and go, I'm done for the day. So you because you have no control over that, you can get extremely stressed at times. And I've definitely been through periods of my life where I've been way too stretched with various different projects. But I've also set myself up within the project so that there's only so far that they can take me, and I'm very intentional about that. Like as a restaurateur, I started when I was like 21, and I owned 2 restaurants, and I shouldn't have, to be completely honest, but the learning curve was really steep. And because you end up working 100 hours a week for 4 months straight, you realize quite quickly that that's not sustainable and that's not a healthy way to be. And so you set things up for yourself in the future that won't create those situations. And I think, for me, that's been a gift and a curse, right? Like I'm really ambitious, but I think I'm also really protective of my weekends and my personal life and time with my family and stuff like that. So it kind of it means that you maybe don't run as fast at things as you probably should, or if you really want to make them work, because like any new project, it's not just, you're not just going to make it happen like without trying really, really hard. So yeah, I think about that quite often, but then I kind of remind myself that I'm already doing quite a lot, so maybe I don't need to do more.
Gosh, I feel like with what you touched on around being able to say no and keeping your private life intact, keeping your weekends free, I feel like a lot of people really struggle with that. Personally, I've had problems with that as well, like saying yes to too many things, as we discussed in the car. How do you say no? Like, let's play out what that conversation might look like if someone's asking you to deliver on something and you're wanting to put that boundary in place. How does that go?
I never say no, but I think that I've set things up so that I don't have to say no, so that there are other people supporting me in the work that I do, or there are other people that are actually responsible for the day-to-day stuff, and I support them. So I think it's really poor leadership if you are constantly saying no to people, right? Like, you need to be there for your people. And look, I'm lucky that I'm, sort of leading organisations or sort of on the strategy side of organisations rather than in the minutiae. So yeah, I don't say no. I mean, I'm sure that at times I do say no, and sometimes I'll just say, hey, like, that's not for me to do, that's for you to do, and if you need help with it, then I'll support you with it. So yeah, I think there are definitely times when I've had to say no, because it's just, you can't be in 2 places at once or whatever, but I try to always say yes, and I try to bring other people on the journey with me so that they can be part of it as well, so that they can take over some of the stuff that I might have to say no to in the future if I can't manage all of those things at once,
Yeah, and I imagine it's exciting for a person to have ownership of something so that they can feel really proud of what they're working on. So talk to me about your team that you have built around you. You obviously have a lot of people that are supporting you in the background with all these different initiatives. Do you have a strategy around the types of people that you surround yourself with, or what does that look like?
I wouldn't say it's an intentional strategy, but I think people are naturally drawn to people that think similarly to themselves, and that have, similar ways of working or doing things. Like I feel like my team, I don't like to think of it as my team, but there are people that directly work for me or work with me, and I suppose what I hope that I've created is a situation where it was my team on a project, but I like to try and find people within that team that can get to a level where they're working with me. So, for example, like with my restaurants in Russell, I was 100% shareholder. I have two guys that are, exceptionally good at what they do. In order to hang on to people like that, you need to find ways to incentivize them. And so now they're not my team. We are the team. There's three of us, so we work together. Yeah, I have more experience than them with certain things. So, sometimes I'm supporting them, but sometimes they need to support me with things as well. So I suppose the same, with Everybody Eats, like I support our general manager, but I don't feel like it's, she's working for me. I mean, at the end of the day, technically she's employed by the board and I'm the chair of the board, but I think of us as peers, So I think it's about empowering other people, as you said, and that's something I learned pretty quickly, like for a period of time I was a hands-on sort of owner-operator type person, and I was lucky to get that experience in my early 20s. And so by the time I was in my late 20s, I realized that, actually by being absent from a physical location actually empowered my team to do better work. And every time I looked over their shoulder or picked up the pieces, it would take away any of their desire to work for themselves or to do something. So actually, I think letting go is one of the best forms of leadership that I've learned about. So I really support that. And I see it so often with friends or people that I'm working with. They don't realize that their team aren't reaching their potential because they're constantly picking up the pieces. It's a leadership style that's actually proven to be the worst leadership style. There was a really important article I read, which was a piece of Harvard research around leadership styles. And I can't remember exactly how many of them there are, but there is one which is basically just moving really, really quickly, but doing everything yourself. And when someone else doesn't do it, you just do it for them, and you don't even tell them that you're doing it. And it is the worst leadership style. It's good in one or two situations, but for the most part, it's terrible. And I looked at the numbers, like they'd quantified it, and I was like, "That's me. I can't do that." And it's actually much more relaxing giving other people, the reins as well. So, yeah, I guess hopefully that's to some extent my style now.
So for all of you listening to this, let go. That is the lesson here. We have to talk about how you ended up running 2 restaurants at age 21. I mean, gosh, I don't know what I was doing at 21, but how does someone get to that position? And what was that like for you?
Well, it's a mixture of, I guess, like privilege, ambition, and complete ignorance, So the reason that I ended up in that situation is my parents owned the building. They ran the restaurant themselves for 5 years. They moved to Auckland. They then sold leases ever since then. And their tenant at the time just wasn't paying their rent, and the restaurant was doing terribly. So as a landlord, they weren't getting any income from their investment, right? And I was just finishing university, and they were sort of saying, "We're going to kick this guy out. He's not paying his rent." So for some reason, I didn't know what I was doing next. Like, I wasn't the type to, go and sign up for a grad program at a bank or whatever. Like, that's just not me. So I said, "Oh, well, why don't me and my brother do it?" So I'd literally worked in a bar like 3 times. I was into food, and I'd sort of grown up around food because my mum, was a chef in the restaurant, and she loves cooking. But I had no idea what I was doing, like completely no idea what I was doing. And I just had to learn, and I had to learn fast. And the reality is that the restaurant that was created in that moment, or the continuation of the restaurant, it wasn't a good one. Like, it wasn't a great example of a restaurant, but it worked, and we made money, and people came to the restaurant, and we served them. And the best thing that happened is I just learned a lot in a really short period of time. But still not enough in those 4 or 5 months, because I just did it for a summer, and then I passed that business on to my chef at the time and his partner. So, yeah, privilege, like my parents own a building that they lease out. Like that's privilege, right? Ambition, like, and ignorance. Like I thought I could do it. I was wrong. Like I couldn't do it. But that's what I was saying before, like about sometimes a little bit of naivety is really helpful because you get yourself into situations that you wouldn't otherwise, and you have to learn. So yeah, I learned, and I guess it's interesting, right? Because at that stage I had no idea that this would kind of become my life, but I enjoyed it. Like I thrived in that chaos and that stress, and I was 21, so I could handle it.
Yeah, have the energy for it and the drive.
Yeah.
And Tam, you mentioned about great restaurant. What makes a great restaurant?
Wow. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question. So many things, like people go to restaurants to eat delicious food. So the food has to be delicious. I think there are plenty of restaurants that actually focus on so many other things that they forget the fact that people are going there to eat food, and the food has to be really good. And delicious food can look like a lot of different things, It could be fish and chips, and it could also be, a multi-course degustation. It depends on, what you're going for. But regardless, the food has to be delicious. And look, there are plenty of great restaurants in the world that are really expensive that serve multi-course degustations, but the food isn't actually delicious, and I think they get found out eventually, right? But I think, it's about hospitality. You have to feel comfortable. You have to feel welcome. What most people end up complaining about in restaurants or writing bad reviews about is actually the way they're treated. So all of a sudden, if the wait staff are rude or they feel like they've been ignored or, even worse still, someone gets the wrong end of the stick of a joke, all of a sudden the food's not delicious anymore and, the drink's not cold enough and all of those things. But it's actually about how we were treated and how we were welcomed and whether we were made to feel at home. So that's why, a lot of restaurants go to a lot of effort to make the environment feel really comfortable for people, and that's why I think particularly in high-end restaurants we're seeing a movement away from really stiff environments, right? So not many tablecloths anymore, it's like everything's served on something that feels natural. So it's just about putting people in an environment that they feel more comfortable in. So yeah, I think, two really obvious things, hospitality and delicious food, what make a good restaurant.
Yeah, I agree. I consider myself a foodie as well. And at the end of the day, I'm just looking for good food and to be treated really well as well. Otherwise, I'll just make it at home.
Yeah.
And then talking about great restaurants, you have Everybody Eats, which I believe is like a social concept and is really focused on zero waste. How do you bring that great restaurant vibe to what you're doing there?
I think being a restaurateur was really, really helpful for setting up Everybody Eats. What I've seen a lot in the charitable space is that people end up working in a charitable area that's completely different from their previous career. And then they've got to go through that learning curve again, which people have huge success doing that. But I suppose for me, what made it a lot easier was understanding, the principles of what make a restaurant good and what makes good service and what is efficient for kitchens and front of house and all of those things. So hopefully I brought some of those elements into Everybody Eats. And I think my initial dream for Everybody Eats was slightly different to what eventuated because, like anything, I learned along the way and I was perhaps a little bit unrealistic with what we would be able to achieve with the constraints that I put on the concept, which is working almost exclusively with surplus food and also with volunteers. Volunteers are amazing. They're the most important part of the organisation, and what's great about volunteers is that they never have an attitude problem because they chose to be there. And I'm constantly amazed at the incredible things that volunteers can do. But the reality is that they generally can only turn up at sort of 5 or 5:30, and they're not technically skilled in the kitchen. So there's only so much that you can expect of them. But yeah, like with the background in restaurants, I feel like a lot of the systems that I created allowed us to actually execute something quite impressive using volunteers. So, what started us off was that pop-up on K Road at Jamaizi Street in St Kevin's Arcade, and we were consistently feeding over 300 people in an hour and a half, 3 courses, so 900 plates in an hour and a half. I think the maths on it's like a plate out of the kitchen every 7 or 8 seconds or something, and that's with volunteers. We've got chefs in the kitchen who are from a restaurant that are volunteering their time, they've never been there before, and then everyone else is a volunteer. So yeah, having the background in restaurants allowed me to kind of create the systems and the structures to do that, and to, actually empower the volunteers to do that work, because it's quite frantic actually in that environment.
Oh yeah, and I have to share, my first job was a kitchen hand down the road from Gables, one of Nick's restaurants. Well, actually both of them are down the road. I remember my dad telling me that if you can, it was as a kitchen hand. We used to call it an underwater ceramic technician. That was like the term that we gave it to make it sound a bit fancy. But he said that if you can wash dishes, you can do anything. And I truly believe that. Going to school and then after work, having to work, I think I was 15 at the time, working with all of these grown-ups that knew what they were doing, high stress environment, like it was quite a high-end restaurant. But everyone needs the dishes, right? That everyone. And it taught me so much. Within your volunteer group, do you have people that are coming into it volunteering as a way of gaining experience into that world, into hospitality?
Yeah, I mean, we have all sorts of different volunteers. We have literally, 10-year-olds that come with their parents, and then we have people that are 80 years old. So a wide range. Not a huge number of people that are very, very focused on getting that experience. What's actually quite interesting is a lot of the people that want that experience are actually older, so they're not 15 to 20 when you're generally trying to look for those experiences. But we do have people that through volunteering at Everybody Eats then move into the hospitality industry. We'd like to see more people of that age bracket that want to upskill, and we have considered setting up sort of a branch of Everybody Eats that's very focused on training youth in particular. But it adds a massive layer of complexity, and I think what we've been very focused on as a charity is sort of staying in our lane and making sure that we do what we said we're going to do, really do that really well. So I think it's a possibility for us. We do work with chef training schools like MIT and AUT, and we have really good relationships with those organisations. So we do sort of collaborate with them and give some of their students real world experience. But yeah, we would love to see more young people, particularly people that like to be underwater ceramic technicians, because it's a hard job, and as you say, like I agree with you. I think everyone should do a job like that. And I think also everyone should do a job out the front. So whether that's in a retail store or in a restaurant or whatever. I mean, it doesn't suit everyone's personality type, but having a go at it's going to make you realise that quicker than not having a go at it. So yeah, I think that experience is so important for people, and more so probably now than ever before, right? Because we can kind of hide behind computers and Zoom meetings and all of these things, and we don't have to kind of like really engage with people. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that school of thought.
Yeah, and there's no escape from the yells and screams from the kitchen when you're washing those dishes. Well,
you've got a lot to manage, right? As a dishwasher, you've got chefs who are generally pretty stressed, who are communicating very directly. I think the culture of yelling and screaming has hopefully kind of made its way out of kitchens now. But regardless of that, like the chefs aren't adding flowery language to things, like they need a pan and they need it now. And then you've also got to manage the front of house who are coming in, and they're making a real mess of your section, right? So there's some diplomacy that's required there, Oh, can you stack your plates and can you put the cutlery in here? And that's life, right? Like we have to learn how to get what we need from people, even if it doesn't seem like that's what we're doing, So it's like all those micro communications and learning those things is really, really helpful. And it's just hard work. And sometimes we just need to know what hard work looks like. And yeah, maybe that's because you might learn that type of work's not for you, or you thrive in that type of work. So yeah, it's there's a lot more to it than washing dishes.
Absolutely. So we have to talk about food waste. It's what most of your projects are about. How do you go from food and drinks and being really passionate about that area? Like, how did you get there?
I mean, I grew up in a family that's very low waste, like my dad will eat what's left on someone's plate, on his family member's plate, or his good friend's plate. So that was sort of built into me, and I think it's just natural for me. Like I'm like an economist at heart. I love efficiency. I hate waste. So I think that was sort of innate. I suppose what I learned from running a relatively high-end restaurant was that there are some real failures in the food system, especially being in Russell in the Bay of Islands. We're in this beautiful place, quite isolated, but with, amazing kai moana and, producers of incredible food, like, in the far north. But a lot of the food that we got came from other parts of the country because that's how the structures and the systems and the quota system and things are set up. So that really frustrated me. And also just seeing the waste, what people don't eat when they're paying lots of money for food. So yeah, I found that difficult, but what really sort of opened my eyes to it was the work I did in the UK. So I did a master's in what I call green economics 10 or so years ago in the UK, and for my dissertation I volunteered at and visited, it was about 10 different projects, and 2 or 3 of them were very focused on reducing food waste, and I spent some time with some pretty sort of maverick young guys and girls who are literally like diving in dumpsters and pulling stuff out and turning it into meals for people that needed it. And that really piqued my interest in the food waste space. And when I researched about New Zealand, I realized that we have exactly the same problem that we have all around the world, particularly in the Western world, is that we're exceptionally good at wasting food. And I'm really glad to say that I feel like New Zealand's done a pretty good job in the last decade or so to change particularly commercial food waste. And that's part of a legislation change, but also just changing attitudes from big businesses that realise that it's just not okay, and also they can probably do better than pay to dump it. They can donate it to someone who needs it. As I said, I think it was sort of always within me, but when you see it firsthand, I really wanted to do something about it. And I also saw an opportunity, I was also very aware that there are a lot of people that don't have enough to eat, and people have been using surplus food to feed people in need forever. It's the most obvious thing to do. So, Everybody Eats is kind of about that, but there's, other strings to its bow as well. But yeah, I think I saw what a lot of people see, which is just an opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. Opportunities where you're using business tools to solve real world problems, as well as, creating a great business concept, a great restaurant. Yeah, that's wonderful. You're obviously very in tune with all of this work and working sustainably and doing a lot of great work. Do you have any form of frustration when you're out in the world and you're seeing that there's still a lot of waste and still a lot of people that maybe don't care or don't have the tools or knowledge to be able to care? How is that for you?
Yeah, there are huge frustrations. I guess when you continue to be frustrated about something, you do something about it, or you just it's sort of built in. So I guess I've sort of analysed food waste and people's behaviour around food for quite a while now, and I think that there are certain things that will unfortunately probably just never change. My sort of thesis on why people waste food is because I don't think that we're connected to it, right? Mm. So if you grow your own tomatoes, you're not going to let them rot on the ground. You're gonna be very proud to make a dish out of them. If you're rearing the cattle that you eventually eat, you're not going to throw that meat in the bin. But this is part of modern life in our society of specialization, is that we can go into the supermarket and find minced beef and styrofoam with plastic wrap over it. We don't look that cow in the eye, and therefore it doesn't have quite the same value than if you're a farmer or whatever. The same thing happens with our clothes, right? This cotton, I didn't grow this cotton. It probably came from Egypt or something. I have no idea what it takes to grow it. Mm. And, I'm guilty of it with clothes, I probably, throw clothes away or donate clothes before I should, because I'm disconnected from it. And I think that's what's happened with food. And I think, as I said, we've done a really good job in this country with commercial food waste. There's still room to move there, but household food waste is still really bad. I think it's it's something like 15 or 20% of total food waste happens in the household, and we're all guilty of it. But I think a lot of that is around education, and I'm a big fan of using the freezer, like freezers are very good at putting a stop to something spoiling. But, I see it, particularly with people that can afford to waste food, they waste food, and I don't know how quickly that's going to change. What really frustrates me, we've got these scraps bins in Auckland. I don't know if they've got them in other parts of the country, but we have our general waste bin and we have our food scraps bin. And I put my food scraps bin out every week, like I hope everyone else does. And I count the rubbish bins on the curb, and there's like 10 where I put my bin, and there's like 3 food scraps bins. And putting food scraps in landfill is a nightmare. Like that's turning into methane, and that's really contributing to global warming. If you put in your food scraps bin, it gets turned into compost, which is a positive thing. So yeah, it's just upsetting that, like, I feel like the food waste's been on the agenda for like 10 or 15 years, like everyone's heard we waste a third of the world's food, food waste in landfill's really bad, but people are still not using the correct bin. Like, it's really not that hard. So yeah, I think there's more education that's required, because that's just not okay. Like, I get it, if you don't like brown speckly bananas, fine, put it in your compost, actually freeze it, but put it in the right place, Yeah, that's frustrating.
Take the time.
Yeah, care a little bit more.
One thing that we've been doing, because I agree with you, I lived in Auckland City, I used to waste quite a bit, and now living rurally in the far north, we took food scraps to go feed the pigs down the road. Like, these are things that you do in the far north in rural communities, but it's just something that I just wasn't aware of. I did use my food scraps bin when that came out, though, in Auckland. I guess it's this disconnect, as you say, to where your food comes from, where your clothing comes from, and if it's inexpensive, if it's cheap, and if you can afford to waste, I guess you're going to do that when that's not on the top of your priority list. What would be a way that we could encourage people, perhaps listening to this or thinking about this, to care?
Well, I think teaching them to care is just about that education piece. I think teaching them to do something because they have the knowledge to, affect change within their own household or their own business or whatever is different to that. For me, it's about being really intentional when you buy things. So I buy clothes for durability as much as I buy them for, whether they fit me or what they look like. And that's because I don't want to be going through lots of clothes. And it's the same with food, right? So, when you're buying food, are you going to be able to consume all that food? And if you're not going to be able to, what are you going to do to make sure that you can consume it later? So that might be freezing it, or it might be making a large batch of something, eating what you need now, and then freezing the rest. There are so many inefficiencies with the way that people work in their home kitchens as well. And it's a real shame. And maybe we need to bring home ec back. If this country ever had it, I don't know. But I feel like even people that I know very well, like, they just don't necessarily know how to be efficient in their kitchen. And I think that's one way that we'll waste a lot less. You don't have to make one meal that you eat one night. You can make 10 meals, and you can, store them in a way that makes it efficient for you in the future, and that you're not throwing things away. But yeah, I unfortunately, people are cooking less, like that. That's kind of one of the other things that encouraged me to do the research that I did for my dissertation, is this realization that we're becoming increasingly disconnected from food. So how do we reconnect people with food, and good food as well? There's so many things that we need to do around food to kind of reverse some of the negative things that we're doing. And what's really interesting from an academic perspective is if you look at all the problems in the food system, a lot of them are actually solved by doing the same thing. So if you look at obesity and nutrition or malnutrition, you look at food waste, you look at all of the main problems that we have with food, most of them will be solved if we cook our own food, rather than relying on other people to cook the food for us. And we increasingly do that, right? So we have Uber Eats We have fast food. We have pretty inexpensive, light touch ways of feeding ourselves. And what happens when you put your nutrition decision in the hands of someone else who's vying for your dollar? They make it pretty delicious and unhealthy. And that causes us lots of problems. Like, we're very familiar with that problem in this country, right? So yeah, reconnecting people with food is something that I think if we could do in this country or all around the world would be time well spent for our children in particular.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's nice to get the kids connected to food in the kitchen, understanding where it comes from and those efficiencies you spoke to. If you don't care about the environment, at least care about your money back in your wallet, like time, if you're pre-cooking meals, freezing them, saving a lot of time and money. So if not for that, then at least care about it for yourself. Let's go back to all of these projects again that you're working on. And I was thinking about it in a way, of course, it suits your personality and things, but we talked about hospitality industry and how it can be quite stressful. What are some rituals or rhythms or practices that you have to be able to manage that stress? I guess it fluctuates. It's quite volatile, isn't it? It's periods of quietness and busy. Do you have any practices that you have that work really well?
Well, I think I can try and answer that question in two parts. So the first part will rewind the clock 15 years and pretend that I'm in a restaurant and I'm really, really stressed. Anyone that's worked in restaurants or anyone in the hospitality industry will understand this. But what's weird about that industry is that you actually don't find the time to eat and drink properly. So what I did is I was basically eating food at like 10:30 at night after I'd finished service. And when you haven't eaten properly all day and you've been on your feet all day, your body probably, going back to, hunter-gatherer times, it probably thought it was going to, you were going to die. So you're going for like high calorie stuff and you're just shoving in like whatever you can that's, really high calorie. And then you go to bed and you're sleeping on this really full stomach. So I actually made myself really unwell. I actually developed like a very bad stomach problem. So that was a big lesson. So I think in terms of rituals, if you're really, really stressed, forget about whether you work in the hospitality industry. Make sure that you're eating and drinking at the right times and you're eating and drinking right. So what most restaurants do is they do a family meal or staff meal before service at like 5 p.m, right? It's a really, really good time to check in with everyone, talk about the service ahead. And this, you can do this in other aspects. Like, you don't have to be in the hospitality industry to do this. Drinking enough water, these are just the most fundamental things. But, if you're not eating well and you're not drinking well and you're not exercising, you're going to have problems, right? And like, I see that now in my life now, where I'm not running around on a restaurant floor and I'm not chasing my tail and super stressed, is if I lose track of my diet or the quality of food I'm eating or when I'm eating it, things like that, then I'll notice it having an effect on my mood and all of those things. What's probably the ritual now for me, because I have my food and drink in check, although sometimes you can get your drink aspect of your life out of check, which is a ritual that I take part in with my wine enthusiasm. So that's an obvious one, right? People know about that one, but the one for me now is exercise, right? So if I don't exercise, I'm not fun to be around. I'm really grumpy, and sometimes I can't exercise because I'm busy, or I've got to look after my child, or my back's. I've got, unfortunately, have a really bad back, and I can't actually really exercise at the moment, and it really affects my mood. And that's the first thing that I talk to. Or I notice with my friends about having children, is like there's this thing called the dad bod, right? It's a real thing, because one of the first things that you lose time for when you have children is exercise, right? Like, we're all working, we've all got to eat and drink, and then once you've done those things, once you've looked after your child and they've gone to bed or they haven't woken up yet, like, yeah, maybe you're going to do some exercise at like 5:30 in the morning, or are you really going to exercise at like 7:30 at night? Because we know that's not a good time to exercise, right? That gets your heart rate up, means you sleep badly. So, we lose exercise, and I try and thread it into my day, and I'm lucky to be able to do that because I have quite a lot of freedom with the way that my day is. But sometimes you just can't exercise. So, yeah, those things, food, water, exercise, those are fundamental. Like everyone knows that, but we lose track of that when we get stressed.
Getting the basics right, eh? Food, sleep, exercise, all of the things that seem to be so hard to get in, especially when you have kids, as you're learning. Thanks, Nick, for joining.
Thank you.
This was truly such an inspiring conversation, especially for myself. I've been sitting there making mental notes about, okay, I've got to get my diet right, I've got to get this right. And also just taking the time to care about food waste as well. And not that we also talked about clothing and various other things as well. I think that's what I'll take away from this conversation, is definitely about how can I care more and how can I just take some time to think about things a little bit more differently. And for anyone that's interested in hearing more about Nick's journey and the wide, broad number of projects that he's got going on, I'm going to chuck in all the links to all of your different projects. So if anyone's interested, you can learn more about that. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I would love it if you would subscribe and leave a comment for the podcast. It really helps the podcast and helps others find their way to this space. My signature 8-week program is now live. I've created it for creatives, social entrepreneurs, and leaders, those that are ready for their visions to actualize and create more flow. We'll be working one-on-one as we expand your thinking, move through challenges, and take aligned steps towards your vision. I always welcome your feedback, so please reach out by email if you have any thoughts or reflections on the podcast today. Tihei Mauri ora, stay well, and in the meantime, I hope you stay inspired.